I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings,
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, welcome back to the Bodybuilding Legends podcast. I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Ed Connors, one of the original owners of Gold's Gym with Tim Kimber and Pete Grymkowski. And Ed helped a lot of people in the bodybuilding scene. He helped them with their careers. So thanks for joining me, Ed. It's great to talk to you.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Well, Ed, let's start at the very beginning. How did you get into bodybuilding when you were younger? What was your interest in that?
Well, I was a student at UC Berkeley in the 60s.
Okay.
And I knew I was going to be drafted for Vietnam. So I joined a gym to lose weight. I'm one of those guys that I was a 250-pound fat kid, in
really?
college. Yeah.
Wow.
And I got down to 177 for the Army.
Okay. Wow. What year was that?
1968. I graduated from Berkeley and went into the military.
So what gym did you join?
It was a Jack LaLanne's European Health Spa.
Okay.
In Oakland, California. And I think I was so, well, I know I was so appalled at the way that they tried to sign me up. I know that in the back of my head, I must have thought, well, if I ever have a chance to change this, I will. Because, it was back in the day when a membership could cost, $500 to $3,000 for, 3 years, 5 years, lifetime, who knows?
Okay.
It was a racket, and, they'd take you into a room and have a closed circuit TV camera on you, and the manager might even call in and tell a salesperson to hurry up and close me.
Wow.
It was like buying a car. It was not pleasant. So, fast forward to when Pete, Tim, and I bought the gym, and we were charging $19 a month, and that was it. I mean, there was no big deal, or whatever you had. We pioneered daily, weekly, monthly memberships.
Okay.
And we were low-cost gyms before Planet Fitness. Of course, back then, $19 was equivalent probably $53, $54 in today's money.
Yeah.
But it was by comparison, it was a very cheap and good gym, because the Jack LaLanne's had things like the wooden rollers to beat off the flat.
Right. Right.
It was Monday, Wednesday, Friday was men, Tuesday, Thursday were women. The gym was co-ed on Saturday, and it was closed on Sunday.
Wow, no kidding.
So it was people. I don't think people now realize what a different world it was, and for many years.
Yeah. So did you end up going to Vietnam?
I did.
Did you? Okay.
22 months over there.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you came back, you kept working out, and did you get into bodybuilding at all?
Yeah, and I took a job working for an East Coast architectural firm after the Army. And I'm an architect.
Okay.
And I got laid off in 1975, and when I went down to Orlando to interview with Disney to work on Epcot as an architect, I went over to to see a friend from the gym I trained at in Connecticut, who was at Orange Avenue Gym in Orlando, and that's where I met Pete Grymkowski.
Oh, no kidding.
So the weather in Orlando reminded me so much of Vietnam. I said, I don't care what they offer me, I'm not taking it. But when I saw Pete Grymkowski there, I said, I had just come from an interview in LA, and I went by the Gold's Gym there, and my God, you'd be the biggest guy there. You ought to come out and, compete. And he said, oh, I'd love to, but I'm going through divorce. I don't even have a car. I said, well, if I take that job out there, I'll fly you out. You can stay with me till you get on your feet. And so Pete was, my first house guest, and I've had 500 since. 3 years later, he calls me up, or 4 years later, and says, Ed's Gold's Gym is for sale. Are you interested? And I thought I was going to be, one of dozens of shareholders. And it turned out to be just me and ultimately Tim Kimber and Pete. So we bought the gym for, $100,000 in 1979. And a year later, I opened up the first gym franchise in San Francisco, because since I'd gone to Berkeley, I knew the city.
Oh, okay.
That was the first gym franchise ever. We called it a license at the time.
So you guys bought it from Ken Sprague, right?
Right.
Okay. Wow.
Joe Gold only owned it for 5 years,
Right.
and he sold it to someone who sold it to someone who sold it to Ken Sprague.
Yeah.
But the beauty of that is, I mean, I don't think Joe Gold would ever have allowed Butler to come in and film Pumping Iron.
Right.
But Sprague was into the whole. I think he even had his own sound stage, or movie studio in Hollywood. So he understood that, and of course that changed everybody's lives.
Yeah, I interviewed Ken, and he told me all about that, how he covered up the windows and everything, and he really made it convenient for them to film.
Yeah. In fact, part of the deal was that when we bought the gym from him, since he knew I was an architect, I had to do the drawings to convert the old Gold's Gym into a legal residence.
Oh, really? Okay.
So when we bought it from Ken, he had already moved it to Santa Monica. I think he was going to make it more of a business, more of a commercial success.
Okay.
But his wife died quite suddenly, unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, trying to think of her name,
Marion.
Marion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he sold. I don't think the business was losing money. It was a lot of headaches. We had Robert Blake Beretta was our landlord. And he was going to jack up our rent. He was training at Don Peters' gym in the Valley.
Okay.
And I think he was jealous of, or he was trying to help Don. He didn't want to have us there. And I was also working as an architect. I kept working as an architect for the first 5 years that I owned Gold's Gym.
Oh, really?
So I led really 3 lives. I was a gym owner, I was an architect with a firm, and I was also a consultant, an architectural consultant.
Wow. Okay.
So
when Ken owned it and you guys bought it from him, it wasn't making money. Wasn't that considered the mecca of bodybuilding even back then?
It was, but it wasn't. It wasn't working as a business really back then.
Okay.
It was. I know when Pete, Tim, and I, our first year, we owned it most of '79. We grossed about $250,000, and I think we lost $15,000. So it was, it was, well, we was actually only making money because of the t-shirt sales. And then Weider pulled our ad.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was painful. And I eventually resolved things with Joe. But no, it was basically a small business.
Wow. So what did you guys do different, Ed?
We moved it back down to Venice in 1981.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 81, which was our good fortune because I was working for the office of Charles Eames. Have you ever heard of the Eames chair?
No.
He's a famous American designer.
Okay.
He had just died, and his wife wanted some help finishing up some architectural projects. So I was working down there in Venice at the corner of Brooks and Abbot Kinney. And there was a warehouse for rent down the street, which was the first bay of a 4-bay warehouse building, 6,600 square feet. So we were having problems with our landlord. I was also working on the parking structure for Frank Gehry's new shopping center in Santa Monica. So I knew the area was going to be changing. Parking would be difficult. And I said, why don't we move the gym back to Venice? So we moved it from 4,400 square feet to 6,600 square feet.
Wow.
And over time, we evolved. In 12 years, we were at 26,000.
Jeez,
wow. So I think our good fortune, our luck, half of life, I would say, is luck. And because once you get it, you have to be prepared to act on it or be persistent and work hard. But we moved into that first bay, and then over time we added, because the fitness industry was evolving. There were no bikes in the gym when we bought it.
Right.
There was no aerobic, no cardio. So as we added each room, we added more resistance machines. We added a aerobics room. We added 100 pieces of cardio ultimately or more. So we evolved along with the industry. So for about 2 or 3 decades, that 17,000 gym when we were in the 3 bays, that was considered the ultimate gym. That was the mecca. That was the model for hundreds of Gold's gyms.
Okay.
We had a franchise model that when we ultimately actually sold out was at 15,000 square feet. So that was the minimum.
Okay.
Keep in mind the Gold's Gym you see in Pumping Iron was only 4,200 square feet, and yet that was the mecca. That Arnold Schwarzenegger had to go from Graz, Austria to Venice, California to train because that was the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, hard to believe now because any place in America, any urban area, you've probably got a dozen choices, or at least before the pandemic.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy how it's changed.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys have it where you just owned the one bay? Because I heard I've interviewed like Rick Valente, and they talk about how it was so great in the beginning when you just had that one room and everybody was training in there.
It took us 12 years to fill out the entire building. So we probably were adding a bay every 2 or 3 years.
Okay. All right.
So that first bay probably lasted maybe 3 years, I guess.
Okay. Gotcha. So yeah, like you said, the 80s, that was really the decade for bodybuilding, right? Because that's when the fitness boom really took off, and then more women started to get into it. Women's bodybuilding came along.
We actually, Pete Grymkowski was dating Lisa Lyons.
Oh, was he? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So and she really started women's bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And we pioneered. In fact, we insisted our gyms be co-ed, which back then was not the case. So we actually got picketed in the South because of that. But no, we were.
You got picketed in the South because you guys were co-ed?
Right.
Really? Wow.
I mean, people thought the women were going to get raped in the gym. And frankly, over the years, I mean, I've personally been involved in 37 Gold's gyms. We had 704. I don't remember one case of a woman being assaulted in the gym.
Right, right.
Of course, people would say about Gold's Gym Venice, the men are men and the women are too. Some of those women are, they were bigger than a lot of middleweight bodybuilders.
Wow, yeah.
So
what was the atmosphere like back then, Ed, in the early?
Well, it was electric, and I guess it still got some of that magic. But people would walk in there and they would tell me that they didn't really feel like working out, but when they got in there, they couldn't help it.
Right.
And Pete had this theory that the loud music helped, caused energy to flow from individuals and actually help them work out more. And of course, this is the day before, headphones, iPods.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a different world now. So I mean, that's one big thing that's changed is how people listen to music in a gym.
Yeah.
go. That's what I call it. That's it.
My camera. Legs are awesome.
Yeah, I'll get there on time.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was the biggest headache back then, which is hard to imagine. But I would get calls from my gym manager saying, Ed, you know, they don't like the music we're playing. Can I, you know, what can we do? And we would have to have different radio stations at different times of the day to satisfy the different, you know, moods during a typical gym of a day. Yeah.
Huh. Now, had Joe Gold open up World's Gym down the street from you guys at that time?
Well, not right away. I mean, when he sold in 1970, he went back to the sea, and I think then he came back into LA, and he regretted selling his gym, although not to us, obviously, because wasn't the case. But he opened up a World Gym on Main Street in Santa Monica, and he kept it more like a private club. I mean, when he died in '04, he had 600 members. When we sold in '04, we had 12,000.
Wow.
So his business could not have survived unless he had the franchise income coming in.
Yeah.
So he copied us. I mean, and actually he kept his fees pretty much the same. And we tried to meet regularly for lunch to talk about, you know, which our owners. because if we would not renew someone for whatever reason, they might then try to become a world gym, or vice versa. So there was always this back and forth as to who were the people you might want to have join versus not continue with your name.
Oh, okay. Were there a lot of big bodybuilders that went to both gyms that would go to World?
Yeah, there were quite a few. Lee Priest, even though Lee was a house guest for his first 5 months in America, I think he was having trouble with some people in Gold's Gym Venice, so he went over to World Gym for a while. Lou Ferrigno went back and forth.
Yeah.
He was kind of. I didn't mind that. I mean, you can get stale, you get bored.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of our members had 2 or 3 memberships at different clubs.
Mm-hmm.
That was the day. That was the time when people did that. No, I completely. And you've got to make the gym convenient. I mean, we were both close to each other. There was a powerhouse there too at one point. But no, it was Arnold. Of course, Arnold was loyal to Joe Gold because that's where he first came. But we had good relationship with Arnold and Maria, and he would poke his head in the gym a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he's keeping it alive now because he trains there.
Right.
And if it weren't for him, I think Google would have taken over the building already.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. What'd you think of Joe Gold? When you got to meet him?
Well, I tell people if you looked up the word curmudgeon in the dictionary, there would be a picture of him.
Right.
He apparently had injured his back in Korea, so he was in a lot of pain.
Okay. Yeah, he was real an old school bodybuilder, kind of like Vince Gironda too, right?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, he was a nice guy, but very opinionated, strong opinions, and
yeah.
Well, a good example is I ran into we would go to Arnold's restaurant a lot for business lunches. It was called Shotzi's.
Uh-huh.
It was in the building he owned on Main Street. And one day, there was a period, 1991, 92, when Arnold owned a World Gym for 2 years. And he said to me, Ed, how come your gym is so busy and mine is empty? Or not empty, but not so busy.
Yeah.
And I said, well, it's a stereo system. And Joe Gold he thought I was joking. Arnold laughed. But, Joe Gold would not allow any music in the gym.
Right.
So it was like a church. And so, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm very self-conscious when I drop a weight or make noise.
Yeah.
So having that music to match that is something I like, and I think a lot of people do. So, that was a big difference. It was like a church in there, or yeah.
That's what I heard. It was like it depended on what kind of personality you had. Like Mike Christian, he wanted more the rock and roll, and he wanted more of the high energy, so he would go to Gold's. Or other guys would go to Worlds, it all depended on, what kind of personality you had, what kind of atmosphere you wanted.
Yeah, I think the old timers especially went to World Gym, and the people that Arnold knew too, which and he would have been, unfortunately, he would have probably been, bothered too much at Gold's because the tourists came, and Joe Gold wouldn't allow any of that.
Right. Were you a big bodybuilding fan, Ed, when you were younger?
Yeah, I was. I think Superman was the hero back then. Hercules, Steve Reeves.
Yeah.
So I saw this as the ideal body. I mean, I was not an athlete. I was an overweight kid, but I admired that look. And my dad was a surgeon, and my brothers are doctors. And so I was fascinated with that athleticism, health and fitness.
Yeah.
And then I realized, and I guess I was always looking for the next Arnold.
Yeah.
To help somebody who would achieve, that level of fame. And John Cena was one of my house guests. I discovered him in the Gold's Gym parking lot. So he's probably the one who's come closest to kind of achieving that fantasy I had of discovering talent.
Yeah.
And he's influenced a lot of people in and out of the fitness world. He's been a great role model. But he was out on spring break to see an ex-girlfriend, and I think he was sleeping in his car. but I saw him, and at the time in the gym, Mark Wahlberg now was training there along with Matt Damon, and John Cena looked like Matt Damon with muscles or
He
big
did,
arms.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of people wonder what I see, but to me, it was so obvious. So I approached him in the parking lot, and, you know, I scare a lot of people or they blow me off. And I said, have you ever thought about professional wrestling? And he said it would be his dream. And I gave him my card. We communicated, went back to Massachusetts to finish college. And he came out after he graduated, stayed with me for his first 5 months and got his, you know, feet on the ground and went to wrestling school. 18 months later, he had a contract with WWE or WWF at the time. So I've gotten like 24 guys into wrestling after Vince McMahon tried to buy us in the early 80s.
Okay.
So I got to know him. Ultimate Warrior was another house guest. Jim Hellwig.
Okay.
Sting, wrestler Sting.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle. You know, not all of them, you know, achieved John's fame, but Ultimate Warrior certainly inspired a lot of people, and John, and then in the bodybuilding world, I would, you know, the magazines were the social media of the day. So I would have I would have house guests who would then shoot in the gym wearing our clothing. So back then, you know, a full page color ad in Weider's magazine would cost 35 grand. But you could pick up an issue of Muscle and Fitness, Muscle Builder, you know, Muscle Mag, and you would see all these pages with shot in Gold's Gym because we had our name over the mirrors.
Right.
You know, very, very easy trick. You can't take a photo in Gold's Gym Venice without knowing where you are.
Right.
So that was all free advertising. So I feel it was all my house guests and the people we gave memberships to that helped make Gold's Gym the Mecca and famous and the biggest gym chain in the world, because we spent very little on marketing. But we gave away, I'd say on average, $70,000 a month in free memberships or clothing.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
So that was the you know, grassroots marketing.
Yeah.
Our accountant made us keep track of what we gave away for tax purposes. So it was, I mean, we went from 60 to 80 grand a month in freebies.
Wow. Unbelievable. So now when you talk about these, how big was your house, first of all, Ed? You said you have.
Well, I had 3 at one point, both.
Okay.
Yeah. And my last one on the beach was about 4,700 square feet.
Okay.
I had 4 bedrooms, and they were usually filled. And it was kind of, I mean, back in the 80s and early 90s, there weren't gurus.
Yeah.
So my house was kind of a guru house. So, you know, Jay Cutler might be there with a couple other guys, and they would exchange. Some of them might be from Europe, so they would exchange ideas on, you know, what are you taking supplement wise? How are you eating? What are you training?
Yeah.
And they would learn from each other. And when you're staying under the same roof, you can't hide a lot.
Yeah. Right.
And someone like Jay was very flexible. You know, he'd come down the stairs and say, "Who wants to train legs today?" And you know, someone would say, "Well, I don't want to do. How about arms?" And they, "Oh yeah, sure," and then go down to the gym. And all 3 of my homes were within walking distance to the gym.
Wow.
You didn't need a car. I mean, it wasn't. LA is really a lot of different communities. And Venice is, you know, 100,000 people. My last home was maybe 3/4 of a mile from the gym. My first one, which I had for 11 years, was 2 blocks from the gym. So it was a hop, skip, and a jump. And the biggest trip guys would make for the week would, you know, go 7 blocks to the grocery store.
Wow.
And the beach was right in front.
So when you had these house guests, you would just approach these guys who you thought had potential and just say, "Why don't you come to California?" It's like they didn't live in California. Just say, "Come to California. I got a house for you." And they would stay rent free. And would they stay as long as they want?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, sometimes I overbooked, or someone, you know, so there were a few times where I didn't really have the room, but I would see people would come out. You know, the Gold's Gyms back then ran a lot of Gold's Classic competitions.
Yeah.
And the winners would come out to the Mecca to be photographed, and if they had potential or something, I'd say, you know, well, you want, and Jay Cutler was an example of this, where he said it wasn't the first, when he came out the first time with Carrie, his fiance, I said, well, I saw him being photographed in the gym, and I said, my God, you look great. Where are you staying? And he named this motel on Pico, which was really a bad area at the time. And I said, well, you're not staying there. You and Carrie can stay at my place. And he said it was when I invited him back later on that year that he decided to pursue bodybuilding as a career.
Wow.
So someone like Lee Priest, Lee was stranded. He was invited to California by Lou Zwick, who somehow left him stranded in Venice. And Irv Gelb, the photographer, brought him over to my office and said, hey, look at this kid. And I took Polaroids and FedExed him to Weider. And 2 days later, we had lunch with Joe. He offered him a contract, but it took months to get going. Mm-hmm. So during the first 5 months that Lee Priest was in America, he stayed at my house. And there were other house guests at the time, some fun stories.
Now, how old was Lee at the time when he
turned 21 in my house?
Turned 21, wow. And how about,
I remember that because I bought him an ice cream cake.
So he obviously had great potential back then. You could see, this.
Well, yeah, and Jay Cutler did an interview recently with me, and I don't normally say this, but I admitted to Jay, and thank God he agreed. He said, Ed, who's the most incredible bodybuilder you've ever met? And I had to say Lee Priest.
Wow, is that good?
Because at age 21, he was. He was incredible. I mean, it's perfect, except for, if he'd been 2 inches taller, I think he'd been Mr. Olympia. He's 5'3", and, if his legs had been a little bit longer, who knows? But he had a mind-boggling physique. He had 21.5-inch biceps.
Jeez, unbelievable.
And 20 inches, being an architect, I've taped a lot of the guys, and 20
really?
inches
Okay.
20 inches is a huge hurdle.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Now, how about Jay? When you saw him, how old was he?
He was 19 or 20.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the guys were 19. I don't know how I met them so young, and even back then, there was no internet,
right? No
cell phones. It's amazing I met as many people as I did, or found as many people. It's just, I can't explain it.
So what would you look for, Ed? Would you just look for basically a young guy who you could see had the genetic potential? Like you said, you saw John Cena in a parking lot. Did you see him because he looked like Matt Damon and he looked like he had a good physique? Yeah, he had Lex Luger and Sting were partners in a gym in Atlanta, a Gold's Gym. Okay.
And they had a telegenic look, great for TV. Mm-hmm. And so I was very much aware of Lex Luger's face, and Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, and John had what I would call a telegenic face, just a great looking face. I think I should kind of veer here from. Actually, it's been harder for me to find male fitness models like a Mike O'Hearn or Greg Plitt. Mm-hmm. than it's been to find a pro bodybuilder or pro wrestler. So having that face, that marketability, is just something that you see, and I guess living in LA with the movie stars and all that, you're kind of attuned to what is it that makes that person a star. Yeah. And some of the guys, for instance, like Greg Plitt, who's now, God rest his soul, right? He photographed better than he looked in person. Yeah. So some of the guys, most of the guys, look great when they get photographed, but others who you aren't sure of look a lot better on film than they do in person. Yeah, that's good. But John just had a great look, and he was a natural bodybuilder and still is, but he had big arms, and he was only 6 feet, which, typically the WWE wants guys that are at least 6'2" or 3. Mm-hmm. But back then they weren't quite so critical, and he proved himself. He knew how to work the crowd. He's a great. He may not be the greatest wrestler ever, but he certainly knows how to. He's the greatest professional wrestler. Yeah. He's having a great acting career too. Yeah, he's done great in the. I loved him in The Marine, and I liked his comedy bits in the various films he's been in. And I think he's coming out in the new Fast and Furious.
Oh, is he? Oh, he'd be perfect
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
So yeah, no, he's. I guess if you can get in front of 15,000 people every night and perform, you can act.
Right.
So yeah, he's. Again, a lot of my house guests really surprised me. Like, I mean, at least 7 of them have gone on to start supplement companies.
Wow, really?
Or,
Yeah, one guy I recently talked to was Rich Gaspari, and
yeah.
I just texted Rich this morning, and I told him I was interviewing you, and he's like, "Wow, he helped me out so much." So now, Rich, did you see him at Gold's? Because I know he took 5th at the Nationals, right? And then you went.
No, yeah, well, I kind of remember meeting him in San Jose at a contest.
At the Nationals, yeah.
And he had like so many guys who are short, he was kind of in denial and wanted to compete as a heavyweight. There was no super heavy then.
Right.
And I said, Rich, if you go down a class, you'll probably win and get your pro card. And by the way, if you want to come out and work one of my gyms in Southern California, you're welcome to.
Yeah.
And I think he was just 19 or 20. And so he ended up working at my gym in the Valley in Reseda. And that's where he met Lee Haney, Bertle Fox, and a few other people.
Right.
My Sting, Steve Borden, was my manager for that gym.
Oh, really? Okay.
So he was not the best employee. He's pretty Italian and pretty high strung.
Yeah.
He should tell you some stories of things he did while working in the gym. But he totally blew me away by starting his own supplement company, which I failed many times with Gold's Gym. We tried a half a dozen times to get supplement company going and weren't so successful.
Wow.
But Rich has done it a couple times. So yeah, he really amazed me. But yeah, he came out to California. He probably stayed with me for a little bit, and then lived in the Valley, 17 miles away from Venice. So he had to move up there to work.
Okay.
But yeah, I gave him, some good advice, I guess. I've done that to others over the years. Jeff Long, tried to get him to go, down a weight class.
Okay.
There are so many that were kind of shooting for the moon, and I said, well, get your pro card first, and then add the weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about Rich, you just mentioned luck. I remember reading the story about him. He was in the Nationals in San Jose. He was like 20 years old, and he was a heavyweight, like you said. And remember that Jeff Williams, I think, who was being promoted in Weeder's magazine. He was a big guy, and I think he thought he was going to win. And then when after the prejudging, he knew he wasn't going to win. It was going to be between Rory Liedlmeyer and Bob Paris. So he didn't come back to the finals. And Rich was in 6th place, and then he got moved up to 5th. And if that wouldn't have happened, maybe you wouldn't have noticed him, because he was in the top 5. And then, you brought him out to California, and his whole life changed. Plus, you gave him that great advice to go down to light heavyweight.
Well, but it's funny. I mean, I can go to a contest, and sometimes the most interesting person I'll meet will be in the audience.
Really? Wow.
Like Matt Mendenhall. I mean, I remember walking down the aisle at some contest, and I saw these calves sticking out. and I approached him, and I brought him and his wife out to California. So yeah, I don't. I probably would have noticed him. Well, Paulo Amedo, do you know Paulo?
No.
He was working with Rich Piana for a while.
Okay.
Paulo, in the first contest I saw him in, he was 9th, but he was incredible. I mean, yeah, look him up. Paulo,
Okay.
He's now retired, but incredible bodybuilder. Yeah.
So it's just, you could see the genetic potential when you see these guys.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a combination of the looks and the physique.
Right.
Yeah.
Genetics is only 5% of it, but if you don't have that, forget it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's for what the bodybuilding or the fitness world wants, you have to have that extra 5%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that's kind of sad, because I know how hard some of these guys work, but
yeah,
they just don't have it.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I mean, maybe I judge too quickly, but I don't. There's so much work involved. I don't think you can look at this as a hobby.
You're right.
And right now, I don't even know where bodybuilding is going. So the only people I encourage now are in the bodybuilding world are the ones that are 5'5" or under, that I think will potentially be able to make some money in the 212 class.
Oh, really?
I brought Flex Lewis to America in 2004, and he's been the 212 winner for 6 years in a row. Derek Lunsford Ford is someone I encouraged, and then Michael Cleaves, who just got his pro card last year. He's only 5'4", so he could be a real threat in the 212 class.
So why is that, Ed? Why are you encouraging the shorter guys for the 212?
Well, because I just think a lot of Americans can relate to that. It's just, you don't have to get to 300.
Yeah.
And at 5'5", 5'4", 212 pounds on that frame is a good look, or pretty damn impressive.
Right.
I mean, I think more Americans could relate, or were more attracted to the 212 lineup in last year's Olympia than the open class.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion, but.
What do you think about this classic physique? Do you think that's a good division to head in?
Yeah, I think that could be the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
I think maybe the bodybuilding will die like the women's, and the classic shorts will get shorter, and we'll be back to where we were.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
It almost seems like it's going that way, doesn't it? I hate to say
it does to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone like Chris Bumstead or Mac Robinson are just amazing physiques for their height and weight. So again, it's about creating that illusion.
Yeah.
That's that genetic quality where you could be. I mean, Chris Bumstead is now well known, but I mean, look at that physique, and you'd swear he has to weigh 25, 30 pounds more than he does.
Mm-hmm.
So he can pull it off. It's a great look. It's like a Mike O'Hearn in the early days.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you guys bought Golds in the early 80s, you saw bodybuilding back then. And that's really my favorite era, going back to all the eras of bodybuilding. I like the 80s the best.
Right.
Because the physiques were more advanced than the 70s. Right. But they looked attainable. And I think that was more inspiring for someone getting into the sport. If you saw the magazines and you saw guys who looked like they had physiques that you could get if you really worked hard,
Well, you used a good word there, attainable.
Yeah.
And I think that's what America wants now. I mean, I'm working on a new gym prototype because, the millennials are different. The people that made Gold's Gym the mecca and the biggest gym chain in the world back in the 80s and early 90s, they don't exist in any numbers now.
Right.
So the millennials want something different.
Right.
But I'm fascinated because I'll be with big bodybuilders and they'll come up to them, and I see a whole different attitude than I saw back in the 80s. In other words, back then they were freaks, but now they're, these people look at them like, oh my God, that's pretty incredible. You could maybe teach me something. So in other words, they don't necessarily want to train or eat like they do to look the way they do, but they do respect them for what they may know about, their health, and fitness. So there are some pluses out there.
Yeah. Do you think the drug usage just got too crazy yet? Do you think that's where it went wrong?
I mean, there was no, I think growth hormone started around 94.
Right.
But so in the 80s, there was no growth hormone, there was no insulin.
Right.
I knew part of that time, steroids were legal. And I knew what the guys were doing. There were doctors that they could go to in LA. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing, and they would go on for a few months and they would get off, and their chemistry levels would go back to close to where they were.
Right.
I mean, it was a safe and sane time. It was a simpler, more innocent world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, and the physiques look so much better. And I think it was because, the drugs just got out of hand. Like you said, with the growth hormone, then insulin came in, then they started doing the synthol.
Yeah.
And it just,
I don't know, after 40 years, I can't honestly say I know anyone who was killed or died because of steroids. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a problem with enlarged hearts from growth hormone.
Yes.
And I would say synthol may have killed at least 6 people I know that were house guests.
Wow.
Not Sir Elson Body for sure.
Really? You think so? Yeah.
Maybe Scott Klein, Matt Duvall, there were Ed Van Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. I was present when one of the doctors came out from one of the guys that had just died, and he said, I said, how did he die? What did he die from? And the doctor said synthol poisoning. He said, you can't, or blood poisoning. He said, you can't inject impure fluids in your body and not expect trouble.
Right.
So my message would be that's not bodybuilding.
Synthol I agree. Yeah.
That's really sick. I mean, you know, Matt Duvall, God bless him. I mean, he had 22-inch biceps. He did, you know, he didn't need 23s.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I mean, to me, it looks fake. Again, they've got this body dysmorphia. They can't see it, but
Right.
I think it's ugly. It's ridiculous. You know, it'd be like the women with the breast implants where you know, fake calves and pecs and
Right.
it's out of hand. I mean, that's nuts. That's
I
not.
think another problem is with the judging. I mean, if the judges aren't, you know, getting hard on these guys for doing that, they're just going to keep doing it, you know. And I think even like when they started getting bigger, it was like the judges encouraged that, and then it just went crazy. It just
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I mean, that's why I kind of respected Wayne DeMilia, because I think he left the organization because he wouldn't place people high who obviously had synthol.
Yeah.
Who was the British bodybuilder that had it in his arm?
Ernie Taylor.
Ernie Taylor, yeah, and he came to see me, and I said, I can't recommend you to Weider because you've got fake arms, and he got all upset, and but you know, I mean, it looked fake to me, and
Yeah.
But he placed 5th, I think, in Olympia.
Yeah.
And that you know, you can't reward that, I don't think.
And when you started Golds in the early '80s, the general public didn't really know much about steroids, right? I mean, the mass media and stuff, it was kind of a secret.
Well, again, they were legal.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of, you know, black market, but it was all legal. You know, it was all real stuff. You know, people would look at bodybuilders and you'd hear people mumble steroids, but
Yeah.
I mean, you and I know if it's just a matter of injecting yourself or taking a pill, we'd all look, you know, crazy.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dieting and training. Yeah, I think steroids have gotten a bad name.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, they've saved, well, even supplements. Remember there was kind of a witch hunt going on against creatine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I mean, that Bill Phillips was, he was I think the inventor of that for supplements, and I think he saved a lot of lives because that program 2020 called the gym. They wanted to do an expose on wrestling deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to blame creatine. and I because that year, like 3 or 4 wrestlers had died. And I said, you know, they probably died because they were dehydrated. They ran around the building in the rubber suits. Because, you know, we've seen this with bodybuilders. Sure. And I said, if anything, creatine probably saved their lives because it retained water in their bodies, and they didn't die from hydration. Yeah. And so they ended up changing the entire program. And I think the NCAA for 2 or 3 years after that allowed wrestlers to weigh in, I don't know, 6-7 pounds overweight.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah. So
okay.
I really feel that was one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, really. Wow.
Because creatine, you know, is a miracle product. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed to me like the turning point was that 1988 Olympics when Ben Johnson failed for steroids, and it seemed like that's when the floodgates opened up and everybody knew about steroids. So if you see these guys today who are 280, 300 pounds, obviously even a kid is going to know they're taking a bunch of steroids to look like that. It's a lot of drugs. And I think that ruins the appeal of bodybuilding compared to how it was in the 80s.
Right. And part of it's the fault of the drug companies, I think, or our government. You know, if you're going to tell people they're bad, you know, don't lie to them. Tell them the truth. Do the studies.
Right.
It's like when you open up the steroid box and look at the paper, it says, you know, warning, this does not enhance athletic ability.
Right.
Or this will cause, you know, sterility or impotence. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know one bodybuilder for whom that's true.
Right. Exactly.
So, in fact, that's an issue because guys were taking, you know, steroids thinking they couldn't get their girlfriends pregnant, otherwise pregnant, and lo and behold, they've got a baby on the way.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't have a lot of respect for the drug companies on that issue.
Yeah. You helped Mike Matarazzo also, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, Mike was one of my favorites, and it was a wonderful story because he was again stranded out in L.A. by Lou Zwick, and Paul DeMeo had told him if ever he was, you know, needed help to go to my office or see Ed Connors. So remember he knocked on my door one day, and I actually was giving memberships to the local college football team.
Okay.
And I thought he was a football player, and he still had on his pads.
Oh, really?
So he walked in my office, and I said, "You don't need to wear your pads to impress me." And he says, "Those aren't pads." So I said, "Well, take off your shirt and hit a double bicep." And he had probably, I don't know, 21, 22-inch arms at 5'10" and 265. And I said, "Well, you're not leaving here till you turn pro." And he said, "Well, you better talk to my parents." So I flew back to Boston to have an incredible Easter feast with his Italian parents.
Oh, really? No kidding.
To talk to them about letting their son come out and train for the Mr. USA in Santa Monica in July.
Yeah.
So at the same time in my house, Achim Albrecht, the pro bodybuilder from Germany,
Yeah.
he was staying there too. So Mike and Achim trained together for those 5 months, and I think both of them have great memories of that period.
Wow, that's amazing.
Achim's English wasn't that great, but the combination of having a buddy like that to train with a different perspective, a European perspective.
Right.
It was, Mike always remembers that as one of the greatest 5 months of his life.
Wow. So you had to go back to Boston and talk to his parents to let him come out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sad thing, I guess. I mean, I'm working on my book. I've had 503 house guests that I can document.
Wow, that's going to be a great book.
And I've only talked to the parents of about a dozen. But I would say Frank McGrath and Mike Matarazzo had the most loving parents that cared,
Really?
like, who was a strange old man their son's going to go out and stay with.
Yeah.
And, they grilled me. And, but no, I was there. Mike's parents and his sister were there in Santa Monica when he won. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life. Because his dad reached up and hugged me. And, it was just, it was something I'll never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. He seemed like such a great guy. And I met him a few times. And like you said,
he had a lot of but he had the genetic. I mean, he never trained his calves. He had 22-inch calves.
Right.
He and Mike Francois and Paul DeMeo all had 22-inch calves, the biggest I've ever taped.
Jeez.
So the average pro on stage would be 18 or 19 inches.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy.
Yeah, but his parents were Sicilian and southern Italy, and they climb mountains. I've been there. And his mom and dad both had big legs, and he got that's genetics.
Yeah. Did a lot of people look at you like, who is this guy when you approached them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say the majority of people blew me off.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
What a mistake, huh? And
it's harder now, actually. When I meet someone online or social media, I'll say, are you interested in, professional wrestling? And, they pretty much F you, and so no, it's, it's strange. It's harder now than it was back then. And it's kind of sad in a way, but again, it's a different world.
Yeah.
I think change is the one constant.
Yeah. Any other guys that you can think of who came out?
Well, you're going to be interviewing Gerard Dente.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And he was tremendous, and has his own supplement company, and that's quite a surprise. BJ Braun has his own company now.
Yeah.
There's a half a dozen there. Some people wouldn't know because of their brands, but that was a surprise. Dallas McCarver or Nick Trigili.
Yeah.
My last major pro bodybuilders.
Okay.
Dallas is, I really miss him and Rich Piana.
Mm-hmm.
They died within a few weeks of each other, but Dallas was, great physique. I think, again, just got a little bit too obsessed with the weight and size.
Right.
And no, it's, I'm trying to think of, there's so many in there. Paul DeMeo was so gifted, and I'm sure Gunther Schlierkamp was a great.
Yeah.
He stayed in my house for 5 months with his second wife and learned English, and he never won the Mr. Olympia, but he was very popular and had a great career. And I think that's something I tell the guys when they get their pro cards. It's not all about winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about having a long, successful career. He was wonderful. A lot of German house guests, Roman Fritz,
Mm-hmm.
great guy,
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Hill, uh,
Yeah.
Marcus Rule. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key with the foreign house guests is a lot of them didn't speak English.
Oh, really?
So as arrogant as it sounds, you really got to learn English to be successful in
Yeah.
bodybuilding.
Right. Hey, I talk a little bit about the gym atmosphere, because you guys probably had the best atmosphere of any gym in the country when Gold's was in its heyday. And, I was working out at gyms in the 1980s in Chicago, and they were small, hardcore gyms. And nowadays I look around at the gym when I'm training, and it's like everybody's on their phones, and it's such a different atmosphere. It's really changed a lot, hasn't it, since then?
Yeah, I don't think it's good.
Me neither.
You're right about people being on their phones, and I don't know what we would have done at Gold's with people taking pictures all the time, and
Yeah.
people, because a lot of movie stars train there and they want their privacy.
Yeah.
So that would have been a big issue. Yeah, it's I don't know. It was just everybody was doing their thing and helping each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I hate to hear are people say to me, "Oh yeah, you sell memberships hoping they'll never show up." And if you can imagine, I mean, we had several thousand people a day go through Gold's Venice. We had 12,000 members when we sold in '04.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever remember. The only person who ever complained about the gym being too crowded was one of the Barbarian brothers.
Really?
And they could have trained anytime they wanted. So it was all those people working out that gave it that energy.
Yeah.
And the music, the noise, and we were fortunately didn't need air conditioning or heat, so you're open to the sea breezes, and you're in the the LA sunlight.
Yeah.
Which is kind of magical in itself. So it was just a happening place, and people met people and networked. I mean, people would say, "Oh yeah, Ed, your gym isn't the place you go to meet people," but all of my employees met their spouses in the gym.
Oh, really? Wow.
So it wasn't, it was a meeting place, but it wasn't, it wasn't the kind of social place that you think of. It was, you had to go and do your thing, and and then private training started. So that personal training, so that was a whole nother added a whole nother layer of seriousness to it, or people getting results.
Yeah. And it seems like with the bodybuilders too, it's changed as far as how to make a career out of this, right? Because back then we had the magazines. The magazines were a big place to get your publicity, and now it's all social media. Now, so it's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
And before, it seemed like you had to be a champion in order to be in the magazine. So if you made it to the magazines, you were someone who was established. Where now today anybody can be on social media, so anybody can promote themselves.
Well, there were really only 3 ways to get a pro card back then. I mean, there were three pro cards for the men in a year, right?
Right.
And now it's hundreds.
Yeah.
So it's completely different. But the people would say, well, there's no money in bodybuilding, but now there are hundreds of thousands of men and women worldwide making a living as personal trainers.
Mm-hmm.
So ironically, there is actually more money in it than ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know a lot of guys training and gals training people online making 6-figure income.
Yeah.
And many never even seeing their clients, which totally mystifies me, but it's working for some. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm actually very happy with that, because it made the gym, I think, a safer, better place. People would get results, and so they would keep their membership going longer.
Yeah, true. What do you think about the way the gyms are being run now? I heard you on Dave's show, and you were talking about how Gold's is, it's corporate owned, and they're not really running it like you guys would run it. Do you do any consulting for other gyms?
I've done a little bit. Actually, I haven't talked to the Gold Gym owners in 16 years.
Really? Wow.
But I get calls maybe once a week from somebody wanting to do a gym and asking for some advice. Mainly the smaller personal training gyms, which actually they may be the one type, the 3,000 to 8,000 square foot gyms that they may survive this pandemic better than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And my new business model, my concept is under 10,000 square feet.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, I think the gyms have gotten too big and they're not going to do well in terms of the cleaning and social distancing.
Yeah.
At least till we get a vaccine.
Yeah, but this may happen again, right, Ed? I mean, we may get another super virus coming in another year.
Right.
You never know, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you've seen one virus, you haven't seen them all. I mean, they're all, each one, you know, the Marburg virus, the swine flu, bird flu, Spanish flu, they've each been different.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, you know, this one is not as deadly as the others. The other ones were so deadly that they basically, what's the word? You know, spent themselves out, or they killed their host so thoroughly, so completely they couldn't spread. They couldn't jump to another host.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But this one is incredibly, and I don't know what to believe or understand, because there's no rhyme or reason to what's happening. It seems it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But you know, it reminds me a little bit of, you know, I opened my first gym in San Francisco. I'd gone to Berkeley, and I knew a gym that was for sale in San Francisco. And this was the start of AIDS. I opened up my first gym in 1980, and that's when AIDS began.
Right.
And you know how many people have been killed by AIDS in the last 40 years?
No.
Take a guess.
4 million.
33 million.
33 million. Okay.
And 40 million people are living with it. And I remember then I was talking to a couple of my former employees there, partners, and they said that they reminded me of the myths surrounding how you could get AIDS and all that they had to do to keep the gym clean.
Right.
And a lot of people thought that might be the death of the gym business.
Wow.
And of course, you know, the gyms went on to thrive after that. And actually, you know, good health may become more important than ever. I mean, I don't know, again, I'd like to see current statistics, but I think the last time I heard, 42% of the people who died in New York were in bad health, were in nursing homes, or overweight, or had diabetes. So maybe if you're healthy, you know, you will survive this. Unlike, say, the Spanish flu, which apparently focused on young people.
Okay. Yeah, I just wonder what the impact's going to be as far as how we interact, you know, because it's gone on for so long now, and now it's coming back. The numbers are going back up again. And I just wonder, are people going to be, you know, more standoffish, and, you know, you can't touch each other and you got to stay apart from each other? I think
the media has created such hysteria.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That people are going to be more standoffish. Again, and I'm not saying it was a conspiracy of the media. It's just that, and that's all they have. That's all the kind of stories they do. So in the mind of the public, that's this overwhelming issue. But I mean, you look at it right now. Only 1% of Americans have been infected. We're at 3 million in a population of 330 million, and 95.6% of those have survived.
Yeah, right.
So the odds of dying are pretty small.
Yeah. So Ed, you said you're working on a book. When will the book be out?
You know, I don't know. My publishers, the last feedback I got wasn't that encouraging. I need it's very hard to write a book. Yeah. And it takes a lot of work, but it's been kind of a good project to do in this quarantine period. And a lot of memories, but because I don't think people realize how much the industry has changed, and I want to get that down on paper. Yeah. And some of the history of Gold's Gym and my house guests and bodybuilding and stuff like that. Yeah. Just the house guest alone, I think, would make for a great book. Yeah. You should ask Gerard what stories he remembers from. Okay. who was at the house with him? John Cena remembers 8 other house guests, but I've only been able to find one. Oh, really? No kidding. Yeah. Yeah. What was the longest anyone stayed in your house? Did you have to kick them out? Well, yeah. Frank McGrath stayed at 4 different houses of mine for a total of 2 years. Okay. I didn't really kick him out, but he left my last house to go back to Canada. And then, you remember Joe Millionaire, Evan Marriott? No. Mm-hmm. He became a star of the first really reality TV show. It's called Joe Millionaire.
Okay.
He was a 6'5" bodybuilder that I was trying to encourage to get into wrestling. And while he was staying in my house, I said, why don't you go on these cattle calls, these casting calls? And he got interviewed for this new TV show. He beat out 2,000 others.
Okay.
I think my interview helped. Again, he had a great look.
Yeah.
So he ended up staying in some of my houses for almost 2 years. So it was pretty surreal being with him in the bedroom he was staying in, watching him on TV with 43 million other people.
Wow.
The last episode of Joe Millionaire.
What's he doing now?
He's a contractor in Orange County.
Okay. Wow. That's wild.
I was hoping he would stay in the movie business or acting, but he didn't like it, I guess.
Oh, really? Okay.
I really think a lot of guys who are good looking, pretty boys,
Yeah.
I think they have trouble living with it or dealing with it.
Dealing with it, that they're good looking?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
I'll send you some pictures of Evan and you'll maybe see what I mean.
Okay.
But no, it's I guess a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. When you look at these movie stars like Brad Pitt or Matt Damon, we've been talking about, and you see them off camera, and you can almost see that they're not really maybe liking that look that people love. And I guess that's what I would encourage people. I mean, I look at what bodybuilders have. That to me is a talent given them by God, like their face, their physique, their whole package.
Right.
So if you're given this gift, I think you have an obligation to use it to.
Yeah.
I mean, mine was to be an architect and gym owner, I think, and I'm taking it, I guess, to the max. I hope.
Yeah.
But I was privileged to work on some nice buildings. I'm proud of what I did. I still think I'm a good architect. But and actually, architecture played a big role in my time with Gold's Gym. I reviewed hundreds of plans. I designed the Gold's Gym Venice. I mean, as Mickey Mouse as it is, it wasn't much, but it lasted. It's lasted for a long time. 40 years almost.
Are you still working as an architect, Ed?
I'm doing some things. Yes, I mean, I worked on this new prototype, and
okay,
it's all I'm using my architectural skills for sure. Yes.
What are you going to do with that prototype? Are you going to try to sell it to people who are interested?
Yeah, I'm trying to get financing right now. And thanks to these interviews, these podcasts I've done with Dave and you and others, I've gotten some interest.
Okay. Good luck with that.
So, it would be fun to start another gym chain before I die.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you definitely got the knowledge and the experience, so we could all benefit from that for sure.
Yeah. I'll send you my pitch deck.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah. That's what they call a PowerPoint presentation nowadays.
Pitch deck? Okay.
Pitch deck, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send that to you. Yeah, it'll be, now that I've got your email.
All right, sounds good.
Good.
All right, Ed. Well, I'll let you go. I just want to thank you for joining us on the Bodybuilding Legends podcast. I know you're a man of wealth of knowledge, so I wanted to get some of your stories. And if you think of any more good house guest stories, maybe we can have you back on for part 2.
I'll send you a list, and you can tell me who you might talk to there, then it will jog my memory, and we can get something. We could do a Zoom call with 3 or 4 people.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care.
All right, Ed. Thank you very much.
Have a great week.
All right, you too, buddy. Take care.
Bye.